Welcome to Division 46 Research Webinars. And today we have with us Dr. Mary Alvord. She's the past president for Division 46 Media Psychology and Technology. And today she's going to be speaking with us about enhancing resiliency, research, and practice. So Mary, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to you.
Great. So let me share my screen. Okay. And there we go. All right. So thank you, Division 46, for even inviting me. This is a passion of mine. It's an area of specialty, but I got into the area of resilience through work with children adopted from Russia in like 1990, and even in the late 80s, a lot of that population, because I speak Russian. And then I was looking at the literature and realized that there's this body of wonderful, long-standing longitudinal studies on people who are resilient and looking at the factors of what makes people resilient versus not, although it's not a dichotomy. You know, some people are just more resilient and others less. So, and the talk is really research and practice. I have been in practice for a long, long time, but I was trained really as a scientist practitioner and went more of the practitioner route, but the research has always tugged at me. So we've, and I'll talk a little bit about that. So I'm going to split the talk into really talking about resilience and the protective factors, which are just so critical, and then let you in on the research that we're doing. So what is resilience? Traditionally, it's been defined as really trauma and hardship and huge adversities. And Judy Gratis and I wrote a paper in the mid-2000s really broadening that definition. And it's been used quite a bit now in the literature, because what we work with are kids who also have learning issues and ADHD and bipolar mood disorder and challenges that are there and that you still do need all the protective factors for. So it's a broader definition of resilience. And why is it important? Well, because over and over again, and I think someone's might need to be muted. So just to let you know. But, you know, we see a lot of studies over and over again that show that children and adults, but children, when they study them longitudinally, that the more resilience they have and the more they're able to sort of continue on and bounce back from if there is a trauma, have fewer behavioral problems, their mood functioning is better, peer relationships, and there was a study in 2011, actually, that's not here, but it's a longitudinal study, mostly in New Zealand, and but they had a large N, and with some people, Moffitt at Duke University, showing that kids, even like with self-control and the ability to modulate, do better as adults financially, in their criminal record, in school, with relationships, and on and on. So we know it's really critically important. Judy Gratis and I culled the whole literature. There are many, many protective factors, but what we did is we categorized them into 6 sort of domains. And I'm not going to go over each in a lot of detail, but first and foremost, being proactive, really taking initiative, being able to problem solve, being able to come up with plans when there are difficulties. The next, which is a critical one, and Sunil Luthar writes about that a lot, is the ability to connect, you know, friends, family, teachers, just the ability to have positive relationships with people. And we know that support really helps us get over times of distress and stress. For kids, proactive parenting, which the good news is you only need one parent who sort of gets you and is actively sort of supporting and rooting for you. And the good news is, why is it good news? Well, there's so many single parent families, but there are also a lot of families where there really is only one parent that's tuned in mostly to this child. Community resources, and so families who perhaps not necessarily participate in a religion, but various institutions, clubs, schools, all of those are important resources. And special talents, meaning even if kids have severe learning issues and school is not their success, they have what Robert Brooks calls islands of competence. And everybody has islands of competence. So whereas it may not show up academically, it could show up artistically or athletically, or we can focus on people's integrity and their kindness. And that's what we really need to look at, the specificity of what are people competent in. And the big one, self-regulation. Self-regulation, being able to monitor your mood, your attention, your behavior. We all know it's hard to get along with people when their moods just fluctuate up and down so much, and it's hard for them to function. So those are sort of the 6 big categories. I started running a kind of resilience builder groups in 1992. Actually, I wanted to do it sooner, but we didn't have large enough office space. So when we finally moved into a larger space, large enough to run groups, I started the program. And over the years, this program has really grown. In fact, the demand is so high that we ended up opening another office across town, and we have about 30 groups that run every school semester, and then shorter versions in the summer. And finally, I wrote this up with co-authors and with a lot of contributions from the clinicians over the year in 2011. And this is the important part in terms of research, because if you have a sort of manualized curriculum, that doesn't mean you can't be creative and you can't adapt and be flexible. But for research, you need the fidelity. You need everybody to sort of be doing the same thing if you're running data on multiple groups, which is what we do. So it uses evidence-based, primarily cognitive behavior therapy strategies. But the difference is that it's not simply like a social skills group. It really builds resilience, sort of looking at the protective factors and building those into the curriculum so that we directly work on that. So it's really kind of a comprehensive set. And it's adaptable. We run groups from kindergarten through high school. I know that it's been translated into Portuguese, and so they have adapted it for their high school students using it. And we also we have mainstream groups, what we call mainstream groups, which are kids with ADHD and social anxiety. And then we have groups that are separate for kids on the autism spectrum, although we put some of the higher functioning autism spectrum groups, like one in a mainstream group, just for good modeling for everyone. So it's an adaptable curriculum. And just to give you an idea, there are 15 lessons in each unit. The research, though, we only run it with 12 sessions, since it's so hard to get sort of, again, consistency between leaders' schedules and school schedules. We decided we would just have 12 and 4 to 6 kids per group. Core components are, it's didactic, but it's very interactive. So we generate conversations and discussions. Let's say if the topic is leadership, then we talk about, every kid gets a piece of a puzzle with the name of a skill that a good leader would have, and we have a discussion about what do those characteristics look like? What are some examples? What can they do? and I'll go over some specific. We do a lot of behavioral rehearsal. That's part of cognitive behavior therapy, is not just talking about it, not just learning in your head, but actually practicing. And we have a time period where we do a lot of role plays, and we do free play in which the leader can intervene and correct behavior as it happens. So it's really the power of it. And of course, with any good program, your goal is to generalize the results outside of the office or outside of the school. So we do it by incorporating parents. They come in once a month. The kids talk about what they have learned. Parents get a letter every week letting them know the skill that we're working on and some tips for them. We also, the kids write a success journal, which is just a sentence or two about, how did they work on their individual goal, which they have individual goals as well as the group goals. So that we're constantly looking at how do you build on strengths instead of like what's going wrong, what's going right, what effort did you put into so that you can get things going right. And we ask parents to email us situations so we can incorporate them into the role play without naming kids, but to make it all real. So here are some topics. As I said, we talk a lot about being proactive and taking initiative, not being a victim, versus being reactive, which a lot of the kids are impulsive and react without thinking, or also being passive, which is not good. You may actively make a decision to not respond or to be silent, but that's a conscious decision in a given situation. It's not sort of a regular. We talk a lot about on the mark versus off the mark thinking. So for example, here you see a dartboard, and on the mark would be, I messed up on a test, but it was this test that I messed up on, and next time I'm just going to study harder. I'll ask some questions, I'll get some help, and do better the next time. Off the mark might be, I messed up the test, and I'm really, stupid, but well, I'll try to figure something out. And then way off the mark, we talk about is, I failed the test. The teacher's going to be mad at me. My parents are going to be mad at me. I'm going to go to the principal. I'm going to get kicked out of the school. I'll never go to college. I'll be homeless, blah, blah, blah. So it's kind of helps them see that. And then some of the traditional reading cues, personal space, sportsmanship, those sorts of things. And, okay. Up. All right, whoops, sorry. I don't know what happened here, but so the research that we're doing, we are focusing on 7 to 12-year-olds, and I think I have a slide prior to this, so let me see. Yeah, so as I said, I really been wanting to do research for quite a long time. We obviously have the population, but it's very difficult. Our first attempt was in 2004. We actually did a pilot study. We paid for an external IRB review, but we had so many challenges. There were no RAs to help. We had to do intent and our consents ourselves and assents, and clinicians just didn't have the time. So we realized we needed an academic partner, which was not easy to find, one that did not have their own agenda and wanted to do what they wanted to do, but rather what sort of we want to do. So starting in 2009, we began to partner with Dr. Brendan Rich at Catholic University and continue to do so. So it's been a wonderful partnership. We go through the IRB at Catholic for all of this. So our outcome assessment is a pre and post therapy. We also have a weight control group. We get data from parents, from the child, and most importantly from the teacher. Not all parents agree to have the teacher provide data, but we find that is the least biased in terms of research data. These are just some of the scales that we use. So it's quite a lengthy process, and I'll tell you, like, it can be 45 minutes for parents to fill it out. So obviously not everyone who consents fills out all the pre, and then fewer do the post, but over the last 6 years, we've got quite a bit of data. So we look at resilience scales, and then we have scales for parent functioning. We also have a demographic questionnaire, which is a little different and asks things like, how many play dates has your child had? You know, how many sleepovers? Are they invited to birthday parties? Sort of real life outcome measures. And so I'll thank them at the end, but this is our research team. So we now have a number of psychologists at Alvord Baker, and then Dr. Brendan Rich, who directs the CAB. And at the end, I'll have everyone's names again. So again, our N is 260, but that's not all the number, the pre and post, and I didn't have that. Average age is about 10, mostly male, mostly Caucasian, high family income, which is why we also, at the end, I'll talk a little bit, we have moved into schools to work with underprivileged and high minority populations so that we can really talk about how does this work, not only in this population, but in others as well. So keep my track here. So here's some of the data. Now this is, we actually published within a chapter, a book on resilience. And obviously you'll see these are statistically significant, but we have others that were not statistically significant. But so just letting you know, not everything was statistically significant, but we did get measures from reports from the parent here on overall resilience. And so that was high. Relatedness, the children, their scores were that they had more relationships, felt more connected, maybe even made a friend, because a lot of our kids don't even have a friend. And resourcefulness is how empowered do they feel to make change. And that was at the PO1. This is another, this is in a manuscript in preparation. And here the parents' reduction of problem behavior, teacher report, which again, I'll say, I think is the least biased. Parents, especially where we live, teachers are constantly filling out forms. So they don't really know, is it because the child's getting tested? The child might actually be in occupational therapy. So they don't really know what it is that they're doing, and they don't know if it's pre or a post. So their data really is quite meaningful in that sense, or in terms of being least biased. And here, again, I talked about the demographics. This is a huge statistical change in terms of far more play dates. So almost 60% had no weekly play dates, and now it was just above 10%, and more invitations to birthday parties. Because, you know, when kids are young, you get invited, the whole class gets invited. But with our kids' average age of 10, that's about 5th grade, it's getting selective. If you don't have if you're not friends, you're not going to get invited to that. This is something we published last year, and this is the subpopulation with anxiety. So on the questionnaires, the parents really tell us what is the diagnosis, and we use those rather than they all have intakes, but this is based on parents. And you'll see depression scale, internalizing problems, just a lot of positive changes, and social functioning as well, greater resilience. So the results have really been very promising, more communication in terms of the families, and parents feeling like they have more behavioral control with their children. This is a study, and I think we're doing pretty good in terms of time. I'm sorry that this is not clear. I took this from the manuscript, but this was a group that was a subgroup, kids with autism, but these were not actually in the separate autism group. These were kids who were part of the mainstream group. And we published this as well last year. And so the positive results on communication and engagement, taking responsibility for their own behavior, which is a big deal. If you recognize, in fact, that you have the ability to make changes, and that's really critical to know for these kids to understand that with effort you can make changes and you can learn these skills even if they don't come naturally to you. And you know, with autism, many of these skills, especially the social skills, you know, we get down to eye contact, reciprocal conversations. But again, the resilience of taking initiative, making your own goal, you know, what's your plan? How are you going to do it? What are leadership skills that you can exemplify? So what we have done this starting in, well, started a few years ago. As any research, it takes a while to get going. But we have partnered with 2 schools in Washington, D.C. The data that I'm going to present is from one of the schools is it's a private Jesuit academy, but private, no one pays. The kids are there 10 hours a day. They get breakfast, lunch, and dinner. They're all low SES. The whole school it's 100% defined minority. But these kids have a lot of potential. But what we asked for last spring, which is when we started running and we were able to do a randomized control trial, we asked them to identify those, and it's all boys, the boys with difficulties, difficulties with friendships, difficulties maintaining their mood, their behavior, just kind of high-risk kids. So out of that population, there were 19 kids. So that was for the spring. So they were between 5th and 7th grade. The school, the first school is it's just middle school. It's 5th to 8th grade, and then they go on scholarship to various high schools. And 90% free and reduced lunch, but like I said, everyone gets free and reduced study. This is really a pilot. We started with 19 kids randomized. I'm actually running the delayed treatment group this fall. So the kids who were the controls. It's just the challenge is trying to get the data collected in terms of we had a pizza party, we had, you know, a gathering. So it's hard logistically to even schedule those things with the teachers, with the school. So we tried to pair it with like a parent night or something else where they'd have to go anyway, because these kids come to school before 8 and they don't leave to go home till 6:30. So the parents are not really that involved during the day. And so, whoops, a typo here, but I don't have the exact number yet of how many were totally completed, but we had a sample size of 19. This time we have a sample size of 20. But they said that they wanted to divide the grade. They did not allow us to do randomized control again, in part because they really wanted a few kids to be in the group last spring, and they were randomized to the delayed treatment, and they're feeling like the research should not come first. And so even though we had talked about, what it meant and that we would treat everyone, they said, no, we just want to split the grade. So it's not as randomized as we would like. And we've gotten a small group grant from the AGPA, the American Group Psychotherapy Association, they have a foundation which is called Group Foundation for Advancing Mental Health. Every year they give 2 small grants, and we were lucky enough to apply and get one of them. So that is helping with the school research. So this is just very preliminary pilot, I want to say, with a small data, but we are seeing some positive outcomes in terms of kids reporting better emotional control. You can see the RBP versus the waitlist kids have made good gains. We can't, it's too small of an N at this point to really do a lot of statistical analyses, but wanted to give you a sense. Attitude to school didn't change at all with the waitlist, but really improved with the group. And then more in terms of interpersonal relationships, you'll see that a good improvement. Looks like it went down a little bit here, but again, I don't know statistically, I can't say. And relationships with parents improved. And the parents report better in terms of sort of emotional. So these are skewed the other way. So a better school, going down is better. So just better control in terms of their emotional negativity. And here, number of close friends has improved. So that's pretty striking. Just it's a few cases again, but you know, it's going in the right direction. School teachers reported better anger control, significantly better. Well, I shouldn't say just a lot better, but not statistically. And, you know, we're actually going to be presenting at a few different conferences because there are so many barriers to doing what I call real world research. I mean, it's one thing to do it at a university. You know, grad school students usually do the interventions. People come there for free. They actually often will get paid. I always get a paltry $20 gift certificate after they've finished both packets, pre and post. So it's a lot more effort. People are coming to the practice or to school not to be in research. And so it's just in terms of the time and the logistics and the number of people, there are just many barriers, but we keep kind of going through. But this is our research team. Lisa Berghorst actually directs the research team at Alvord Baker. She was trained at Harvard and McLean, and Nina Schifrin has come to us recently from Yale, and Colleen Cummings worked at Temple University with Philip Kendall, and we have an RA assigned with her master's, and a lot of our staff and our clinicians participate and wholeheartedly. In addition, we have lots of grad students and research assistants from Catholic University, and I think that's on the next slide, are all of their names. So it really, you know, it takes a tribe to raise a kid. It really takes a tribe and a half to do real world research. But from my perspective, that's the most generalizable. I've heard a lot of academics talk about, you know, their research and their intervention, and it's hard to generalize. So thank you.
Wow, thank you, Mary. That was excellent, and so much information that you covered there. I know we have a few questions already from Daniel. The first one that he asked is there something like a R2 variance attributed to each of the 6 protective factors?
I'm not sure that I could.
You might have written that from the first study that you talked about, because it came in pretty early.
Right. So what we did, it wasn't a statistical, it was more going through the literature, more as practitioners, and trying, it was not a statistical collapsing into categories.
He then goes on, thank you. He then goes on to ask, how determine teacher data the least bias? What's the comparison standard?
So I think that's just, it's totally blind. So
Okay.
they're not aware of, especially the teachers in the school are more likely to be aware, but the teachers of students in the private practice come from about 30, 40 different schools. And teachers in this area are frequently asked to complete forms. So unless a parent specifically says this is a post measure, they're really blind to what a child might be doing or might not be doing. They're requested to do these all the time. So in that sense, they are more blind to than the parents, obviously, who know, and the kids who know. Hopefully that'll answer it.
Well, he has a few more questions. So the next one is play dates. How does parental activity interact, and are parents doing more?
Well, so that could be sort of the interaction, which came first, because we are encouraging them to do more, but then that's part of the treatment. And that's why the waitlist control group, which is also a small N at this point, because, people aren't as invested in turning in all the forms, but the hope is, because we interact so much with parents, we have them come in once a month, we give them letters every week, we are encouraging them to structure their homes more so that they can see more positive behaviors. And we're not doing individual intervention, it is a group intervention, but the message is loud and clear that we would like them to do more. As the kids get older, though, we're not encouraging the parents to set up the play dates, but rather for the kids to do that. I don't know that we have that kind of data. And I should say that Catholic University has, they've really taken responsibility for all the data analyses. My practice doesn't do that.
Okay. And by the way, Daniel did put in the chat, thank you for the answers. That helps explain. He did have one last one, and that was related to what you were just talking about with the play dates. Might some have fewer play date rejections?
That's a really great point. I don't think we measure it to that detail, but that's actually, I'm going to write that down. Thank you.
Okay. Well, that's one of the benefits of having these kinds of discussions, is that, we get to walk around the research and look at it from different angles. And
yeah, I'm writing that down, because that's a really excellent, because we wanted to not just, as you noticed with all of our forms, their rating scales are all standardized, but they don't give you the level of detail. And SSIS, which is sort of the gold standard for social skills, a lot of it just doesn't give you much detail. Where real world, how do you know? Is the kid sitting alone at recess? Is he or she playing alone at recess? A lot of our kids say, when we ask them what they do, they say, well, they walk around sort of kicking sticks or reading a book. Lunchtime gives you a lot of information about sort of the social dynamics. Are they sitting alone? Are they sitting at the edge of a table? Are they interacting? But I hadn't thought about the rejection because our kids do get rejected a lot. Some of it is because they don't understand personal space and they are what we call annoying. And we define annoying as a behavior that you can change. And these are some of the elements, that we talk a lot about, not just personal space in terms of physical, but voice, how loud you are, pace. If everybody is sitting nice and calm, and you walk in and you're just, really hyper and you're making a lot of noise, you burst everybody's bubbles. So we break it down in terms of, it's not that you're annoying, it's that sometimes if you do this, that may annoy other people. We talk a lot about intent versus impact.
Okay.
What was your intention versus what's the impact you've had?
Okay. We've had a few other people join since we first started, Jill and Mary and Nan. I don't know if any of you want to ask a question.
I have a question, Jerry Lynn.
Yes.
So I was wondering, there's research, I typically do, most of the research that I do is in gaming. And there's some research that shows that people who play games are more resilient as far as like things like rejection, but also like failure. And was there anything on gaming included in any of the research that you've done?
No, I've done some media work on that, so I've looked it up. And my presidential, one of my initiatives was on media literacy, and I discovered a lot of Sonia Livingstone's work. Her book talks actually about resilience, but it's more in terms of not that the gaming makes them more resilient, but rather than discussion with parents and sort of practicing it, but and talking about it, and maybe with adults, but that sort of open communication helps kids be more resilient in terms of game and knowing like to assess danger or not, and how to handle it and how to handle rejection. I think gaming and I use that term broadly, but just social media contacts can really facilitate kids who are socially anxious. It's sometimes a safer way to initiate a contact. My worry always is, because I deal with so many socially anxious teenagers, is that then their friends are virtual friends, and we want to encourage not just virtual friends, which is fine, but in-person friends as well.
Thank you.
I have a question that kind of follows up with that.
Okay.
One of the selected topics that was listed under your Resiliency Builder program was stress management.
Mm-hmm.
I was wondering if you could expand on that and how it might relate to some of the protective factors, like special skills. Like instantly I thought of, artists, athletes, gamers can be included in that as well, dancers, things like that. So much time is spent dedicated to those skills that it becomes more dominant than others, and self-regulating your time can be an issue and cause stress. So I was wondering if you can expand on that connection.
So what we do is we help identify what are the triggers, because for one person, the trigger may be actually having to do something athletic, and the other, it's actually a stress reduction. So we help the kids identify, but through fun activities, like we get medium-sized books, small books, and heavy books, and we say, okay, so what's a medium trigger? What's a medium stress for you? And we'll do it as a large group activity. And in fact, I've done it for Skype in the classroom that APA has partnered with Microsoft. So we did a stress management one to really identify, what are the triggers, and then how does it affect your body? So I didn't really talk much about it, but we do a lot of relaxation and self-regulation, self-talk, visualization, progressive muscle relaxation. So how does it affect your body, though, if you're really stressed? And then what are positive coping techniques, and what are unhealthy coping techniques? And I think, when you can self-regulate in so many domains, like you said, even time management, you are just more likely to be able to bounce back or deal with the stressors in your life.
Right, because I'm thinking, like that kid at the lunch table, where they might be dedicating their time, to jumping rope or playing their sport, right, or thinking of that, the game that they want to go home and play or something, to ignore the actual physical space and in-person social connections, because they, that's their coping is to default back to that special skill.
Right. And that's when you want to get specific, because, again, it's individualized. I mean, stress management is, everyone defines stress differently. I'll say this, a little bit of stress is positive, and we teach kids that too, because it can serve as a motivator. So, but too much stress then can be paralyzing. But, all of these help us build our skills, but we need to recognize, and that's why each kid also has individual goals in the group, even though it is a group and there's agendas. But kids can work on some of their own issues at the same time that are they identify with their parents.
That's true, because I mean, I'm 32 and I'm still trying to manage stress.
Right.
So it's a practice.
I'm a lot older and I'm still managing.
We'd all be in your office if we could, Mary.
Absolutely.
Well, you know, it's awareness. And for so many of these kids, part of what resilience is knowing that while you can't control everything, there are many aspects of your life you can control. And that's one of the key components. I didn't go into Emmy Werner's longitudinal research, but that's after 50 years of doing resilience research. That's the key she came up with, is that just knowing that there's a lot you can control and there's a lot you can't. So you don't do anything about what you can't control, but you focus your energies on what you can change and how you can affect change. You can't always affect change in other people, but you can do something about yourself.
So true. So true. Wow. Other questions?
Okay, I have one more question.
Go ahead.
Is there anything that I'm sure you probably touched on this, but what are there like some suggested activities like outside of the group or school that you've found help with like the training that you're doing? I mean, as far as, I mean, like you talked about play dates and stuff, but as far as like especially with ADHD and like the hyper focus, like are there different activities that kind of help with that kind of thing that you found? Or
well, I think it's really trying to find what a kid likes to do, and also where are they, because like team sports can be a really positive thing, but if the kid is not there yet, like we've got kids that are on the soccer field and they're playing midfield and somehow they're like way out because they've been distracted by some butterflies. So they may not be there yet, but that can be a goal. So I think anytime you can engage in something they really like, which will keep their interests, you know, it's interesting. We've got a lot of ADHD kids seem drawn to chess. I'm not sure what that is, but and I've encouraged parents to help schools get chess clubs going. You know, things like that. So you really look at what's the area of competence, what's the area of interest, and then what is something interactional that they can do. Because we know from a lot of literature on depression that isolation is a risk factor for a lot of difficulties. So we really want to encourage that sort of human contact with kids. And play dates need to be somewhat structured, especially in the beginning if kids have a hard time. So take them bowling. It's a structured activity as opposed to just come over and let's figure out what we're going to do.
And do you find that schools are pretty, I guess teachers specifically, but schools in general are pretty receptive to like the activities that help the students stay focused, or is it kind of just like I mean, how do you deal with that kind of thing?
You know, I think sometimes they need some support. Some of the teachers they have a lot of students, and so we really try to support them with just kind of catching the kids when they're doing something right instead of focusing on when they're not, so that you can use kind of them as role models. And then some of the teachers I've seen have like those little whoopee cushions so kids can sit on. And then actually the school that I've done a lot of the Skype lessons with, and it's outside of Chicago, their kids sit on those like big exercise balls. First time I saw that, I was like, that is the coolest. And you know, you're talking to kids and they're like, you know, they're talking to you like this, but they're listening. So that's what it takes. It's great. And that's not a class of ADHD kids. Some of them are probably, but that's just a mainstream middle school.
Mary, I actually saw, this is Jerry Lynn, I saw a news piece recently done where several California elementary schools had switched out all their desks to the standing desks, but they also had a swing bar so the kids could be swinging their legs the whole time. That same idea, and that they were seeing some positive benefits of that being done.
Right.
Daniel has another comment, and his is that chess is logical, not all these confusing human issues, or at least at the beginning level, and that the champions that the human issues reemerge.
Right. Yeah, and I think it's structured. A lot of these kids are really bright. They like strategy games, and you're right. It's a very cognitive process. And a lot of them, and the other one that I find lots of our kids gravitate to is fencing. And I don't know enough about fencing, but it's also very sort of focused. And even though it's a group sport, it's very individual at the same time. So those are just anecdotally some things that, we found are positive activities.
Nan did have to leave, but she did say, thank you, Dr. Alvord, and all great session. I must exit for now. And then this is the funny typo. These whiners are very helpful. And then she changed it to webinars. So.
Well, Jerry Lynn, I suggest the next one, you have some virtual wine to offer.
All these people complaining about stress. Oh.
Yeah, there you go. Well, then we'll be to the next seminar. Will have nothing to do with stress per se. It'll be all about alcoholics. Any other questions out there? I know sometimes it takes just a second to unmute. Well, Mary, is there something we should have asked you? Do you have any?
Well, I just think, I guess the one thing I didn't really emphasize is what's exciting to me about the resilience approach is that it's strength-based as opposed to deficit-based. And I feel like in terms of an intervention that's so positive, and I think because the parents feel so positively about it, they're also more willing to embrace sort of the research aspect, because for the kids, a $20 gift certificate seems great, although they want it after they hand in all the pre-packet, and we're like, no, you have to do it again. I'm like, oh. So, but I think just because it's an upbeat way to make change as opposed to a depression group. We may be working on a lot of the same things, but from a slightly different perspective. So, and the research part is great. It just has a lot of challenges, but we're doing it, and we're mostly funding it from within the practice. Like I said, we got the small grant, and hopefully we are applying for additional grants, and that will come through.
Actually, that's a really good point. And I just wonder if anyone listening to this webinar, because it will be posted on our YouTube channel, and my guess in the near future, you'll have many additional viewers. If someone had some resources or personally wanted to be able to give to this research, can you tell them how they would go about doing that?
Well, I think to contact to contact me directly, and I hopefully I put my email at the way beginning. Let's see, but I'll do that. Oh, I didn't. I cannot believe it. But it's malvord@alvordbaker.com, or Dr. Brendan Rich, who's at Catholic University, and it's richb@cua.edu. So I think we're both Googleable. Just Google us and you'll find us. But ideas for foundations, NIH, which has traditionally been a huge funder in this, is really moving more to just the biological interventions and away from the social science. So that's been difficult for a lot of the universities as well. And so we're looking at foundations and any resources, we would be happy. We are a for-profit, so we can't, there's some restrictions, but Catholic University is obviously a nonprofit.
Well, thank you. This has just been a fantastic seminar today, and what a special privilege to have you as one of our past presidents for the Society for Media Psychology and Technology, Division 46. It was actually your presidency that allowed us to have that name, the Society for Media Psychology.
And the new logo, too.
And the new logo, yes. So thank you. It was an absolute pleasure, and we really appreciate you taking the time to put this together for us.
Thank you for asking me.